Okay, everybody, good morning. I understand you've had a lesson beforehand, so you warmed up for it in some ways. It's quite a long day for you, I know. Quite a long day for me. And some of this today we'll be looking at personality, all of it looking at personality, some of it looking about emotions, some looking at the control of emotions, and I must say driving is a great test of the ability to control your emotion. And your belief that some of the other drivers are driving with the same intention to get from A to B as you are. Quite frustrating. So we've had all that this morning. We're looking at the question, is there a winning personality? I've presented it as a question, so I think that's quite a nice way of going through some of the evidence that we've got. We started with a film which you possibly have seen. It's currently being shown live on the BBC big screens, and one in Birmingham, and it's a project that we've been running with the BBC Lab UK, fronted by Michael Johnson. It's Can You Compete Under Pressure? And what we're going to do this afternoon is we're going to be looking at that project, and we're going to get someone to be a participant, go through the data, go through their results, and explain to some degree how we put that together, and talk about the concept of is there a winning personality. It's an intuitive question, and it's one which if you're a pundit in the Olympic Games, or which we have just seen, that you'll hear these sort of terms presented by the speakers, and the idea that they've got some insight into what personality is. And because it's a commonly used term, personality, and because we are, in essence, researchers, even if we're going to be practitioners in the end, we are still researchers in a sense that what we're doing in an academic degree is getting a body of knowledge, looking at that body of knowledge and saying that the best answers to these questions can be found through this evidence. That there are definitions that researchers have used, and we need to look at those. And so the first thing about personality is, it's used in a very, very broad way, and used in a very different way. So what one person is talking about personality might not be the same as someone else's. And you'll see that in quite a lot of other concepts in psychology, emotion being one, mood being another, anxiety, so on and so forth. There's lots of terms that we're commonly used in the English language that we use in one context that may not be the same. So as a researcher, what you need to do is to ask yourself, is that the same explanation as what other people are using? What we do know, though, what intuitively makes sense, is that that personality would seem to be important. We know that some people appear to be more confident than others. We know that confidence is pretty important for performing quite well. And as we certainly, or intuitively, in retrospect to our own feelings and thoughts, would say it's nicer to be confident about doing a task than it is to be really anxious. Sometimes being a little bit anxious is not that bad, but we like to go into things knowing that we have some chance of succeeding. Some people are happy to perform in front of large audiences. Some people are easy at what they're doing, naturally leading groups and so on and so forth. These are intuitive questions that we want to know the answers for. Now, if we had a science that was robust, that could be really helpful for practitioners, coaches, managers, then we could select athletes for the team. That might be in a sporting person sense, and this is a question that a trainee sports psychology asked me the other day, where he was working with a professional soccer club, saying that the coach wants to be able to screen young players and be able to say, well, okay, from the scores of this questionnaire, can you tell us which ones will make it in the professional game? Potentially something a sports scientist would do. Logical that sports science comes and measures stuff, gets questionnaires. What's the usefulness of those questionnaires? So it's not an entirely unreasonable question, but it's a difficult one to answer in that respect. It might be, if you're in a leisure centre, gym manager at a leisure centre, that as someone comes in, You want to know who are the people who are likely to drop out, who are the people likely to attend all the exercise classes, who are the people who are going to need some support in the gym, and so on. If you could assess that at the start, then you'd have some indication of what resources you could allocate to suit their needs. And we know from the evidence, and you'll easily have accessibility to this, is that whilst most of the nations appear to like sport, we saw that from the Olympics, most of the nation also don't participate in sport. And by sport I mean physical activity and leisure also. That we know that we've got a growingly obese population. So in other words, it's unlikely that people are taking part in sport. And the big drive of the Olympics, which again you'll all be aware of, is about increasing engagement in sport, not just at the elite end, but across all the levels. If we could have a personality test that would say, these people are going to need this sort of help, these people are going to need this sort of help, then wow, we would be able to offer something really, really helpful in terms of getting interventions to work. So to answer those questions, we need to know what personality is. We need to be able to measure personality. If we're saying that we're going to use the scores of however we take it to predict who's going to be in the team, who's going to be the best coach, who's going to be able to inspire people to enjoy exercise, we need to know that these measures are pretty good. So as researchers and people interested in answering that question, we'll go, okay, well, we'll start off by saying, okay, we'll go and look at personality. So we look at some perspectives, and I understand you've had some, there's been some lectures in the previous weeks on some perspectives, behaviourism, humanism, I think, cognitive. There are different perspectives, and what they do is they start out with a different way of explaining the world and explaining individuals. And that goes, oh no, that does not make that helpful. So which one's the best? And then the answer to that, I'm afraid, will be, it depends. Each of them will have some method of assessment in some form, where many of them make those assessments which derive a set to numbers. What we've found, and this is one of the first few questions that sports psychologists got interested in, is they take a questionnaire to assess personality and relate that to performance. And what they found was that relationships were really quite weak. So the evidence so far would say, oh dear, so we've got lots of research, lots of studies, they've all gone and used, many have used questionnaires, some have observed, some have tried to unpack what people are really like in a humanistic way, and what they've found is that most of in terms of predicting behaviour, or whatever that behaviour is a bit random. That we can't really be using questionnaires for answering the sorts of questions that we would like to. However, we might be able to use them in a slightly more informative way. It might be that knowing someone's susceptible to anxiety might help them say, okay, well, you get anxious quite a lot of the time in a lot of different situations, and therefore you'll be the one that would benefit from a psychological skills training. Those people who rarely get anxious may not need the psychological skills training. So the personality may be have a very subtle influence on behaviour. If you're a coach, if you're an exercise instructor, it might be identifying the players, the participants, the exercisers, who you can encourage in one way and others you have to encourage in a different way. The key for what we're going to be looking at in some degree is the notion that personality is difficult to assess. We're going to be looking at, very briefly, in terms of the enormity of the research that's been done in personality. And it is enormous. There are hundreds and hundreds of personality questionnaires, each with differing claims of validity, which the difficulty is for anyone going in. You are swamped by the amount of information that you've got on, and this is not something that's hidden away. Google will be able to answer Google personality questionnaires, bang, in it goes. you will see a whole list of questionnaires that are then one click away. Here comes the Eysenck personality inventory. Here comes Cattell's one, and it's click, click, there they are. You'll see the questions. It's difficult to measure psychological concepts. Here we've got someone, looks like Ulrika Johnson, probably isn't, measuring a table. It's great if we could measure personality with the same degree of validity and reliability as we could measure a table. And what we mean by validity in this respect is that we measure a table with a tape measure, in this case. The units between a tape measure are centimetres. The difference between 1 centimetre and 2 centimetres is the same difference between 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 6 and 7. So if we know that our table is a metre, we know it's 1 metre long. Right? And when we say it's a metre long, we understand what a metre long is because we understand the relationship between 1 centimetre. And that sounds, you're saying this is obvious. And it is obvious. But that is, we're getting into the concept of validity. And it's always important to bring back the concept so it's brutally simple, so you can make a judgment on the complexity of trying to measure someone's thoughts. Reliability. If one person measures a table and it's a metre, the next person measures it and it's a metre, the next person measures it and it's not a metre. Unlike my DIY, it takes me 8 goes to get the same score again. And then once I've found the same score again from measuring everything, I may not get it again thereafter. In other words, reliability could be that the person going into doing the measurement is inconsistent. It could be that the tool you're measuring is inconsistent. I might start from 1 centimetre. I might not start from the right starting point. If something like measuring a table produces different scores, and that isn't just me who does, that's a common thing for people who are not brilliant at DIY, a common thing for making errors, then it's where we know exactly what we're doing. When we start measuring someone's thoughts, feelings, what their description of what they're typically like as a person, we are introducing lots and lots and lots of potential error into that score. So it's difficult to assess it, and it's worth keeping that in the back of your mind when you read a study that says we found scores on this questionnaire that could predict performance, and therefore we'd be able to select it with greater degree of accuracy. But it doesn't mean that from these scores we can't find or we can't use this information in a reasonable way. If we find out that someone is nervous most of the time, then the questionnaire which shows us that person's nervous might be quite informative on what we do next to them. If we find that someone is quite good at working with others, then that might be quite useful to us. If we find someone's quite nervous and quite spiteful in a social situation, might be quite nervous. So here we see the opportunity for the nervous person climbing off from the board just to fix their decision to try and jump. That intervention possibly not as helpful as it could have been. So we get to the nitty-gritty, and this you don't need to write this down in any. The reason we've got such a convoluted definition is that it is an example of what they're all like and how difficult they are to define. We'll go over some of those concepts. It's personality, as in what we're looking at, is supposed to be relatively stable. Right? Test, retest, reliability. Personality should mean that if you're confident one day, you'll get a highly confident score the next day. Test, retest, it's reliable, it's stable. The person doesn't change completely. It's relatively stable. Might vary, might be confident at riding a skateboard but not confident in an interview. That's confidence for specific things. but they would be repeatedly not confident at riding a skateboard and repeatedly not confident in an interview, as an example. But it wouldn't say that someone who is outgoing on one day is in quiet on the next day. Personality is meant to be relatively stable. If we think back to the first questions I posed, could we take measures of personality and predict some outcomes from that? Could we say, we know this person here is going to be very extroverted, very good at engaging with people, and therefore, because they really enjoy that social engagement, they could be a good exercise instructor, they could be a good coach, they could work with children. They enjoy that situation. If we found out that someone was quite introverted and found those sorts of social situations quite stressful, then every time they went to a every time they interacted with large audiences, they'd have an increase in anxiety, which would be quite difficult to manage. They'd have to regulate those intense, unpleasant emotions each time they operated in that situation. And others would pick up on that, wouldn't they? Others would pick up on the fact that someone's nervous, and they would be able to, the environment wouldn't be relaxed. So it's important that if it is stable, it has to be demonstrated to be stable. It's the idea that personality has a structure, and we'll look at some structures in a moment, and those structures vary considerably from theory to theory. We're not, again, the difficulty in courses, in any course, is selecting out what to put in and what not to put in. And that is the same for your essays, when you write essays, or anything you present. The potential to put absolutely everything in is, of course, relatively straightforward now. We have the internet. Google will be able to lob stuff in. I don't even need to write a lecture anymore. I could just put this into Google and find one. I haven't, but you can. The information superhighway means it's very easy to get hold of stuff. So we've been this is a very, very selective account of personality. Very selective. And the best way, there is only one way you can get around that, is that's to read quite broadly, I'm afraid. Personality stable, personality's got a structure, and personality influences how you behave. Bosh, that's come out in the next slide as well, of course. Keep things simple, but some of you are writing it down. So we'll look at this structure of personality. It's a famous structure in terms of, it is one of the most commonly used structures. It's by Eysenck, the two Eysencks, there's a whole family of them. There's another Eysenck who still does research now. And it puts personality on a circle. We have, at one side, and we'll start on the introverted side for there. Introverted, quiet, unsocial, reserved, pessimistic, sober, rigid, anxious, moody. They're broad descriptions of whether someone is introverted. It used to be the case that researchers in the early sports psychology said, being introverted might be quite good for sports where you're not talking to anyone. So they went in search of testing that hypothesis and found that some swimmers, some long distance runners and long distance swimmers, but they didn't have long distance swimmers when research was carried out in the 70s, were introverted. So there was a teeny weeny bit of evidence to say that being introverted lends itself to long duration sports. But are swimmers introverted? What's the story from the Olympic Games when the swimmers start the games first, and what else do they start first? Begins with P, ends in Y. They start partying first. Swimmers are notoriously extroverted outside of the time when they're swimmers, when they're swimming in training. We have some swimmers here, no doubt. I'm sure that they would agree with that. Have any swimmers? Okay. Introverted? Extroverted?
Well, it depends where and when.
Okay. Can be extroverted.
Can be.
Wouldn't if introvert extrovert is supposed to be a stable, you wouldn't be able to nail your flag to the mast that they're always introverted.
Well, I'd say when swimming they're always introverted, but when they're outside of it, they're extrovert.
I think so. Yeah. I think it's difficult to talk to anyone when they're swimming. It's difficult, but distance runners, elite ones, tend not to talk to each other when training, doing reasonably intense sessions, and some will talk when training on very slow sessions. So there are situational constraints which suggest that people are not going to be acting that way. We then move to the other side of it, which is the neurotic side. Touchy, restless, aggressive, excitable, changeable, impulsive, optimistic, active. And you look at some of those and you go, some of those might well be useful qualities for sports performance. There are many sports where being active, being aggressive, potentially aggressive. Aggression is a slightly complicated term to use from an academic sense because it's supposed to mean an intent to injure. But where the intent to injure is also very instrumental, in other words, you could win the competition, then the idea that you're intending to injure becomes somewhat blurred. But we could get the idea that might be quite useful knowing that. And then we go to the other side, the extrovert, and the extroverted has often got most of the press, and it's being socially outgoing, talkative, responsive, easygoing, and good leadership. And the idea is that extroverts tend to experience more pleasant emotional states. They tend to be better at regulating unwanted emotions. And there's also some evidence that being high in extroverted helps in sport. Again, very, very tentative evidence. And the idea, and what you'll find when you look at the studies from the 70s and early 80s, is that they tend to be with small sample sizes. And we look at some of them later, so it's not. And they tend to find what they expected, they wanted to find. So it's been a bit of a going. So we will look at a personality test, and this is are you an extrovert? So what I want you to do is you've got 5 questions. Do you long for excitement? Would you always declare everything at customs? Even if you used 4 questions, even though you won't be found out. Do other people think you as being lively? Would you do almost anything for a dare? And what I want you to do is yes, no. This is from the EPI. These questions, so they are from a personality test. There are several different versions of the Eysenck personality inventory. There's 50 in this, and the only reason I'm saying is to give you a flavour of when you actually, if you go to look at personality, just how easy it is to be swamped in all of that. So it's yes, no, 2 for yes, 1 for no. Give yourself a score out of 6. Low score, middle score, high score. Yeah, very straightforward to do. The process of why this is how.
6 or
8. 8. Sorry. Yeah. No, you're fine. I'll talk about the 6 in a minute. Go through each one of the questions, and go through each one of the questions and give yourself a score. Now the question, would you declare everything at customs, is one of, and these are common in personality questionnaires. They are lie questions. So they throw in questions which, if you respond to in a way that looks like you're being socially desirable, and you say, if you say yes to that, that is treated as you're fibbing apart. There's lots of questions just dropped into that to try and get an indicator of the extent to which you're trying to please the person who is giving you the questionnaire, or you might be trying to please yourself. One of the questions would be, if you found £10 on the street, would you hand it in to the nearest policeman? And people would put yes to that, but no one would. It's unlikely anyone would. So there are lie questions in there, and the reason there are lie questions in there is because this just how subjective is this process. Do you long for excitement? Yes, no. So in answering that question, if you had a fantastic night last night, you might not be longing for excitement. You might have had so much excitement that you can't take any more. You might have gone to a party and it's been miserable, so you are longing. So in other words, you scan your memory for previous situations that relate with what you're going to be doing, and then give an answer of yes, no. So, low score. Who scored out of 6? 3. Any 3s? 4s? Few 4s. Few 4s. 4. No, okay, to be a 4. 5s? Oh, Hartman, 5s. 5s. Okay, got a few 5s. 6s? 6s, good. 6s. Now, the thing about personality assessment is that it lends itself to testing. Yeah? So, high and low in extroversion, on a brief scale, should be able to have some prediction for behaviours, extroverted behaviours or introverted behaviours. So who again put maximum score? Who got 6 out of 6? Okay. Have a look around who got 6 out of 6 if you didn't, just so we know who they are. 6 out of 6? Okay, can we have the 6 out of 6s down at the front, please? Can we have the 6 out of 6s down at the front, please?
Andy, are there only 3 questions?
No, there are hundreds of questions, but I would...
No, you've got 4 on the board. I think to answer all 4.
Yeah, you ignore the question, the lie detector. Don't ignore the... Would you declare everything at customers? So you ignore that. If you got 6 out of 6 from the first 3, from do you long for excitement, do other people think of you as being lively, would you do anything for a dare, come down the front.
Second question you've got is 1, 3 and 4. If you've got full marks for that, you get a prize going down.
Okay, 6 out of 6. Do we have any takers for 6 out of 6? Do we have any takers? He did, didn't he? Yeah. He did. Oh, 2. 2. Do you have any takers? 6 out of 6?
So, this is about contributing. You're not going to be the lie. You're not going to be embarrassed. If you've got 6
You
out
might
of
be
6,
embarrassed.
let's see you might be. Just let's contribute. You know, make the most of the opportunity.
Good. Well done. Well done. 6 out of 6. Okay. Well done. The interesting part was these are the questions. You long for excitement. Probably a lot of people would put 2 for that. Do other people think of you as being lively? Well, that's a self-perception. It might not be what other people would think. So we've got people, definitely, who have that, but if we wanted to, we could test that by asking other people whether they would agree with that. Right? They would agree with that. So we could partially validate that, but that wouldn't mean that the person's self-assessment is any way incorrect. It might well be that the situations that person sees them in are different to the whole of the person. When someone assesses this, you all have access to every part of your life. At home with your parents, in your sports field, in your leisure centres, with your friends on the weekend, and so on and so forth. It'd be unlikely that your behaviour would be exactly the same in each. There will be some role-related behaviours where you're more happy and aggressive in some places, confident in others, quieter in others, and so on. And you see that very clearly with teenagers. When my daughter wants something from me, her personality shifts from this moody, aggressive, shouty 15-year-old to somebody very, very pleasant. She shifts from one quadrant right the way to the other, holds it until she gets what she wants, and then drifts back to where she was again very, very quickly. If I only saw one of those, I would think, what a delightful child. Parents' evenings are like that. Her friends see slightly more of the bit more sort of street stuff, which she does outside. But would you do anything for a dare? Would you do anything for a dare? You would. Okay. Okay, last chance. Would anyone want to rescore themselves? Okay. Anything for a dare? Right. What do we want? No nakedness. No nakedness. Yeah. Oh. No. Anything for a dare. Come on. Say that again. I don't know the chicken dance. Sing a song. Okay, one of you pick something to do. Someone does it and then you can all go. You can, whatever you want. You go and do. Okay, this is it. You can do something entertaining. First person to do it, then everyone goes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, go on. Right, give them a round of applause, everyone. They were almost up for it. Okay, what we saw there was just how the process of completing a questionnaire unfolds to some degree. The initial one is when I asked how many people do the question, would you do anything for DARE, is loaded into there so that we can ask people for DARE. Because the point being is that can these scores predict behaviour? Well, what we have from that is the yes, and then we have the behaviour that should validate that, the exact one in the questionnaire, of which we then get a contemplation, did I really mean that? And once they got encouraged to come out, they were sort of committed to being in that situation of might having to do something for a DARE. But if someone anticipates how the questionnaire is going to be used, then it's likely that they're going to try and work out the response that they're going to give. So if you think that this is going to be used for job selection, personality tests are used in job selection frequently, then you think through what are the qualities of the job, how do I present myself to get those qualities in the best way possible. And then many companies use personality tests to screen people out across various different stages. I've done work with business psychology, and the prediction from the scores is not very good, but they'll still use it because it's better than when you've got 10,000 applicants for not many jobs, they will screen out people who are low in certain quality, certain traits. So the person anticipating what the usage scores it in a certain way. If this is used for predicting performance, in sport or who's going to engage in exercise, if the person wants to be presented in a certain way, they can start thinking through how they're going to put those scores down. When the person realises that there's an immediate effect from doing this and it's something that they don't necessarily want to do, start questioning whether your scores were accurate or not, which would suggest that the yes-no part are not absolutes in that sense. I suspect everybody who said yes for the anything for a dare was likely to do everything for a dare almost every time. But to answer that question and be truthful for it, you could be really set up, couldn't you? You could be really safe. If that was totally true, then you'd be doing mad things if someone dared you. And you'd probably say, I'm not going to do that for various different other reasons. So there'd be degrees of that. Then when we get to psychology, how do we measure the degrees of someone from one extreme to the other? When I talked about the tape measure, we have these nice units called centimetres. In psychology, you often see them in Likert scales, and we'll see one later. But the gap between them is at best a guess of how much someone is along that scale. It's very, very difficult to know whether someone is totally assured that they believe that about themselves, or partially, or to some degree. It's very, very difficult to use this as a hard science. It's vital to understand, absolutely vital to understand that when judging scores on any questionnaire, that it's a bit of a hit and miss process. And then we get this, and this I think is quite a nice picture which explains this quite well. So you're an introvert, that means you're shy. And he says, no, I hate people. But he doesn't talk to anyone. It might be quite outgoing. So we start looking at some of the research that's looked at elite and sub-elites in terms of personality. And as I said, this started with research in the 1970s. And the history of sports psychology, which is often found at the start of most of the textbooks, it's not been going like other areas of psychology for the best part of 100 years. It starts in the late 70s. It starts in the 70s and late 70s. So it's not been going very long. This is not meant to. And what Morgan did, he took personality measures called the EPI, extroversion, and neuroticism, and he then gave athletes also a questionnaire to assess their mood. And he asked these, and the research was the researchers would post out these questionnaires to athletes, elite athletes being non-elite athletes, and they would then convert these scores to the population average to see if someone's above average or below average on tension, depression, anger, vigour, fatigue and confusion. And what Morgan found was that extroverts tend to have a more pleasant emotional state. In other words, be lower on tension, depression, anger, vigour, fatigue and confusion. Neuroticism relates closer to that profile, and people scoring high in neuroticism tended to score higher in tension, depression, anger, fatigue and confusion. However, that wasn't always uniformly found. The thing is, with Morgan's work, there are very small sample sizes of 14, 15. The measure of personality is exactly the same which one you've just used. Now, you wonder why doing something for a dare would mean that you can be good at running racing or rowing. That the situations which personality measures are based on are usually very, very broad, because they have to be, because these personality tests are used supposedly across to predict behaviour in different situations, all different situations. Whereas we know that that sport is a very, very specific set of qualities that you need to be confident at doing. You need to be able to control your emotions at certain parts of whether it's sporting competition, whether it's engaging with exercise. And the general questions often don't relate to the specific situations. We had this notion, and the notion sat around for a long, long period of time, that personality is described through this iceberg profile, that extroverts tend to be in a better mood, and a better mood state tends to associate with best performance. And this is a bit of oops, gone back a bit there, as I was just working out. And this is the study. This is an example. 1979, 16 hopefuls for the US rowing team. So what Morgan's done is given this questionnaire out, the EPI, which you've just done, measure of mood, which we'll see in a moment, to 16 hopefuls. So there you are as a hopeful, about to take part in the rowing team to be picked for a competition. And you complete a questionnaire beforehand. Do you not think that those doing the questionnaire had some insight into trying to work out what the researchers wanted? Because you would have thought they might have done. The interesting part to that, or the part to that now, which is generally accepted, is that researchers and practitioners don't use these sorts of measures for selection. And they would definitely not use... and there's an ethical part to all of this working as an applied sports psychologist, in that you wouldn't share those results with the... you wouldn't share the results with the person selecting the team if you felt that they were going to do so. Because if you did, you would not get people honestly saying that I feel really tense. Because the psychologist should be able to work with the athletes who are tense and try and help them manage that tension so that's productive. Not have questionnaire scores that simply say, if I don't lie on this questionnaire, I won't get a chance of being selected. And therefore I will present a view of myself which helps me get selected, even though I still possibly need some help in working through that, some of the reasons why I might get so tense. Nice parts about the literature, how it unfolds, is that you can see these various theories being presented. So if you read a 1970s article where the researchers are excited about this, you get this sense of excitement. We've got this fantastic theory that's been predicted. The test of champions is what Morgan called the POMS and his model of using personality in a 1980. That led to a snowballing of research. Later on, something called a meta-analysis, which sounds awfully clever. But what that is, it sounds awfully clever. It is taking all the studies, mashing them together, and seeing if they address a common question. And the common question is, does the mental health model predict performance? And what their meta-analysis by Rowley found out, and we did a second one with Chris Beattie, who was here a year or so ago working as a postdoc, found the same sort of results. So in other words, 99% of the variation in performance is explained by other things than by the mental health model. Which, by the way, is not to be confused with the idea that you could make 1% difference. Because making 1% difference for an elite athlete is actually a meaningful difference if that means taking a fraction of a second off their various time, particularly in sports where success and failure is determined by the finest margins, say swimming, where it's fractions of a second. fractions of a second that makes the difference. So, in other words, that is where they've got with that. And again, this is how these things are assessed. They are assessed asking someone to introspect on how they are feeling. So you've got 6 questions, which each one represents one of the 6 states. So panicky, 0 to 4, sad, 0 to 4, lively, 0 to 4, and so on and so forth. So let's just have a quick go at filling in that. Who's panicky? 0 to 4. Who's sad? 0 to 4. Who's lively? Who's confused? Furious? Oh dear. Worn out. I say. If you want, just make a you'll see. Okay. Have we got anybody who is not panicky at all? Not panicky at all. Okay? Has got anyone at the other extremes who is extremely panicky? Thank God for that, because I didn't think this lesson was that bad if you were that panicky. I wanted to get out or something, maybe. Have we got anyone who is not sad at all? Oh, really? What about a little bit sad? Oh, sorry. Extremely sad. Are you extremely sad? Oh, okay. You see, I know. What about lively? Is anyone not at all lively? Oh, really? Very extremely lively? Very good. Very good at that. The extrovert performs again as an extrovert. Well done. Confused. Not at all confused? Here is your opportunity for your joke. Completely, extremely confused. Here's you go. I wasn't before I came in. Listening to you for now, I am now. But not that many. Now, I suspect when you filled in those, the outgoing responses to who's going to admit to being the top end of the scores, given what happened last time, there might be someone goes, might be safer here to keep your hands down, because we don't quite know which end of the scheme here could be used. Because if someone said, I'm not panicky, so you're not panicky, how about we test that by getting you to stand on one leg on a table or something? Yeah. So we could test that. And one of the great test from looking at anxiety is to get someone to stand up on a thing and fall back and be caught by their friends. Trust and anxiety. Great for measuring heart rate as they stand up there. Shoots up. Great test. Sad. Sad is an interesting one, just in terms of measurement, is that we developed this scale with school children to begin with in the 90s. School children in the 90s. And we gave out the first version to 500 or so school children who filled out the sad items and so on and so forth. It turns out somewhat further down the road of the validation process is that children would say, so-and-so should put 4 down for sad. I'd say, why is that? If they have a bad night last night? Or they go, no, they're sad. And it turned out that at the time when we were doing this in the 90s, I don't know if sad is still used in that sort of derogatory term of being slightly uncool, but sad picked up a second meaning for adolescents. Is sad still used as uncool? So-and-so is sad? Yeah? No? Has it changed? It's no reason why it should be. No reason why certain words evolve in time. It's why some of these questionnaires, when you read them, you'll fill in your response and you'll think, what on earth does that because the language used was cultural to the country that developed it. And what you'll find is when you complete questionnaires which have an American orientation, particularly say things which assess how you're feeling. Do you feel blue? And it's sort of get the idea that blue is not that good, but it's, I don't feel blue, but I don't feel yellow or green or any other colour either. So, that there are cultural parts to the assessment which really start contaminating the accuracy of what we're going to do. So, what the later research did with mood, just to move the utility, because it's important to realise that these self-report measures have some utility. And what I've done is just picked a couple of examples where a practising sports psychologist would routinely assess the mindset of his or her athletes. And this is Peter Terry, who was my PhD supervisor. And we were exposed to all this as undergraduates when Pete would go off to the World Championships, and he'd come back and he'd have these stories of how the difficulties of being a sports psychologist in World Championships, which were really interesting to listen to. But he'd routinely assess the mood state of his athletes with a view to helping them develop better psychological skills. They knew what their personalities were like, but their mood would vary. So what you'd find is that assessing someone's mood the night before had some insight into whether they would perform to expectations, the blue line, or underperformed. And what Peter found from his work is that it gave 71, just under 71% of people you could correctly classify. Now, the early stages, I said, is there a winning personality? Could we get measures of personality to assess someone to have some utility? Is it useful in the real world to help for someone else to know what someone's thinking, feeling, what sort of person they're like, to do something useful with it? Well, in this case, the answer was yes, it was, because this was the night before. And these were people who desperately wanted to perform very well. And it's a simple, if you get the relationship between you and the person completing it correct, in that it's not been used for selection, it's been used as a tool to possibly lead to an intervention, but not in this early stages where it's simply collecting data. So we're monitoring you. And people in elite teams would know that you get monitored quite often and you don't always get feedback on what's being used. But this provided some useful feedback in that if the night before someone was feeling and had a certain emotional profile which associated with their performance, it meant that it had some usefulness for him. So the scores had utility. They were useful because they could then the behaviour that they initiated was twofold, wasn't it? One, it meant that he would go up to them or contact them in some way, depending on the relationship with them, and see if something could be done. But also, by feeding back the score, it initiates a self-regulatory process. The person realises, I'm not feeling quite right, what can I do about this? And the person then starts going, actually, I am feeling a bit down. What shall I do to cheer myself up? If cheering yourself up is what you need to be doing, and we're going to be looking at parts of all of this later on. It builds into some of the other about how that can be changed. But it offered some insight into shifting mindsets. The idea that the idea that you get some indication of what someone's like. The other side to that is work with Andy Slade, who was a master's student at the time, looked at karate and found large differences between winners and losers in terms of karate, with the idea that knowing someone is feeling somewhat tense, depressed, is useful information, knowing that they're likely to perform. I don't know why that keeps moving. The interesting story for this, and it then relates back to some parts of why broad measures of personality might not be that useful in discriminating winners and losers, is that anger comes out as quite functional for performance. And that might well be because in karate, the combative nature of karate means that people see anger items as somewhat, or misread as I'm feeling ready to be competitive because of the direct nature of that type of competition. But these are the, but when you ask somebody, these are the scores, the idea that you should try to reduce self-reported anger for someone who is in karate may not be the best way to go about things. So in other words, it offered some insight into some of the data. So the summary so far is that personality can be assessed via self-report. Self-reports are estimates at best of personality. I'll reiterate that, estimates. And when you've got them, someone's personality score, whether it's their supposedly enduring personality, their personality traits, or their temporary personality, their personality states, they are going to be at best guesses. They're going to be at best guesses. Because either people don't know exactly how they are feeling, the scales that then assess them are going to be broad at best. And therefore, is some degree that there's going to be some sort of, it's not going to be a perfect science. And they tend to show a weak relationship. Personality traits show a weak relationship. But are they useful? They tend to relate much closer to personality states, and personality states tend to have a greater relationship with behaviour. Oh, wrong way. We have a bit of a. We changed theories now. And we're going to briefly give some context. Because I said there are different views on personality. Briefly go through some different perspectives of how personality, just to give an overview of that before we then move to finish this in just about half an hour's time. But anyone have any bad habits? Yes, of course you do. You're not going to talk to us about them because we don't want to know all about your bad habits. Might be related to sport or exercise. Might be that you talk yourself out of training in the morning. That's very much a bad habit. And some of the ways in which you try to readdress those bad habits is offer some sort of reward. If I do my training, if I train for 4 days a week, then I'll give myself a night out in the town. You reward yourself. Largely behaviourist in their principles. So if personality traits was all about trying to assess what people are like, capture that structure from self-reported questionnaires, behaviourism, which I know you've done briefly previously, operates on different set of principles. And that humans seek pleasure and avoid pain. I don't think there are cases where people seem to seek pain to get pleasure, but we're not going to go into that. Behaviour is modified by rewards and punishments, and that is something that you've all been conditioned into throughout your lives. Your parents have done. Parenting is largely the rewarding and punishing. Not rewarding is increasing the likelihood that something reoccurs in the future. And punishment is the idea that you want to stop a certain set of behaviour. It's why that if you hand your essay in late, you get this threat of being punished getting a certain score, to decrease the likelihood that you'll go through the whole of your degree handing in your work late and failing. Rewards increase, and this makes sense. And we know how this started. I think this is a great theory in that respect. And people ask me, how can you use this sort of sports psychology in areas of your life? Well, behaviourism is something you can look at implementing across many different things. And this is Pavlov's classic conditioning. Food salivation, that's a natural response. So there's the food, the dog salivates. We know that one, yeah? The food comes with a bell, dog salivates. So we've now putting the bell next to the food so the dog recognises the bell with food coming, bell salivation. Anyone got any pets? I walk into the kitchen. If I get the can opener, the cat comes and stands by its bowl. Right? And the reason the can does that, because it believes a can of tuna is about to be opened. It also is a very optimistic cat in the idea that it thinks it'll get fed every time. Sometimes it does get fed, so that the idea that running to the bowl when you go into the kitchen to open the can opener has been rewarded in the past, partially rewarded, so that the cat has had that condition. So, but going to a can opener is a conditioned response to a cat. I suspect we've got other ones. People sharpen knives, the dog comes running out. Why is that? Because sharpening knives means cutting the meat. Cutting the meat means there's some scraps. Dog is there perfectly to hoover up. Lots of those go on. And there it is, beautifully pictured, how dog training works. Anyone trained a dog? Little doggy drops. Dog comes, pat the dog, gets reward. Yeah. So let's put that into sport and exercise. I don't know, Tracy Devonport and I have put 5 chapters in a big BPS psychology book. I think it's in our library. I tried to send it to you. I'm not too sure I did because it's quite a big thing. I think I might have sent it. But it's got lots of examples of how the behaviourist theories then have been applied to sport and exercise. So positive reinforcement, we get this all the time. We can see why that people do this. And if you've ever done a coaching course of some description, you get encouraged to do this all the time. Positively reinforce, encourage the behaviours you want to reproduce, tell the person they're doing it well with the intention that the person repeats it. Negative reinforcement. The idea that unless you change what you're doing, you will be taken off. Personal trainer says, unless you do change something different, you will not lose weight. Different to saying that what you've done was very good. It's saying if you continue doing that, this negative thing will not occur. What is quite interesting, if you go to a gym, is just listen with those 2 codes, those 2 options, positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. When you're listening to someone in an instructional situation, what's the ratio? What's the ratio of which a parent telling his child to do X and Y? How much positive reinforcement is coming? How much negative reinforcement is coming? And what's nicer to experience from the individual? Positive is nicer. Negative often associates with a whole series of other unpleasant emotions. The idea that if you don't change what your behaviour is, you won't lose weight. And being overweight might be associated with a person with a serious sense of unhappiness about their self-esteem. So what you're doing is you're reminding the person of the situation which is deeply hurtful, which associates with some unpleasant thoughts and feelings, and reminding them that unless they do some action to change that, they will continually re-experience these unwanted feelings and emotions, as opposed to doing it in a very positive way. So mine would be always trying to be as positive as possible, and the negative thing to be used very sparingly. My suggestion to you is to take that consequence and see how much it applies in the real world. Oh, I hate it when I just said the same thing. Oh, well, we'll go into it. Humanism. It's not all beach volleyball, but it's a nice photo. Okay, whereas personality traits are a series of self-reported questions, behaviourism is about observation and behaviour. Humanism says everybody is an individual, and humanists, and like the behaviourists and the traits, have good reasons to make that case. Because people are different. We know people are different. And it's very difficult to make generalisations on the basis that because people have got a personality score like this, they're all the same. No, they're not the same. We could find all the extroverts. We find some of those extroverts, some will be lively at parties, others will be lively in job interviews, others will be very good at talking to strangers, others will be, and they will be varying in the things that they will demonstrate extrovert behaviours in. Now, humanist doesn't like generalisations, and what humanisms do around their measurement is they do something called personal construct theory, which I think is a lovely way of working as a practitioner. And for one-on-one stuff, it's great. It is fabulous. Because it places the person you're talking to at the centre of everything that's going on. You're trying to understand that individualness, and that is very positive because you want to listen to everything that's interesting about that person. And how that works is through something called a performance profile, and is used. And I will do it on this one. And I did this with a professional boxer I was working with. And when you're applied work can't be the flowery language of the academic. It's got to be so that the individual understands it. So performance profiling is then how to identify the concepts which the boxer used to define what was brilliant performance, and how he saw himself against those concepts. And the idea that each person has a different view of themselves and defines what they do slightly differently. And we did this for the boxer, we did this for the coach as well. Because the coach and the athlete were having a bit of discussions about the advice being given in between the rounds. And the coach would say, "Why don't you do this?" And the boxer would look at him and go, "I didn't do that because I thought about this." And they'd say that away from the competition and away from the training. But at the time, in between the rounds, you've got 1 minute to do something about that. You actually want what the coach to be saying to be agreed with by the boxer and then to act on it so that's the best strategy possible. You want the boxer to know what the coach is, you want the coach to know what the boxer's thinking so that the information that the coach gives is going to be processed immediately by the boxer and it's something that they agree on. I didn't press that button. And so exploring those differences, exploring why there are differences in terms of how they rate, how they see ideal performance and the boxer's performance is worth exploring because it then sets up, explains the reason why what the coach is saying isn't processed quickly by the boxer. So what we did was simply say, okay, what we're going to try and find out is how you see boxing performance. So we said, okay, give us give us 3 boxers who you represent have been absolutely brilliant. And he gave 3 boxers, and they were famous boxers. I said, of the people who are pretty good, give us 3 that are not very good. And he gave 3 that are not very good. And the reason for doing that is you don't want to say 3 people who are absolutely rubbish, because they can't do it. So 3 people who are good, but not reasonably good. And then from that, you say, okay, what does the best boxer do? And he described a whole load of qualities. And a hit, and good defence, hit and not good hit, good attacks. And he described that for one boxer. And you say, okay, what about this next boxer? And then they would describe that in a similar situation, in another sort of way. And then you explore that in greater depth. You said, okay, in so-and-so's last contest, why did they win that contest? What about in this round? How did they get out of that? And then they would explain how they overcome difficulties, almost always through those concepts, which keep being repeated in how they describe elite boxers. You repeat that process for the not-so-elite, and what you get in the end is this consistency of message, which says he will look at boxing performance through these concepts, and there are lots of them. And then we asked him to rate them. So, okay, in comparison to the elite, which is the ideal, and the elite, which is around about 10, how good are you? And he gave these scores. We then asked his coach to rate him the same way, and we get a completely different set of scores. The coach rated him better than the boxer. When we brought these scores together, the boxer's self-rating, the coach's rating, it was a very, very insightful way of making changes to how the boxer approached training, to the information given between rounds. It opened up what was going on in each other's minds to the other person, which allowed them to say, actually, what I'm saying, so if I'm saying this, he's not processing this because it doesn't mean anything in the same way as I'd hope it to. So it opened up the issues that they were not seeing about each other. So it's extremely useful. I did a performance profile of the coach, and of course they had different concepts. So how the coach saw elite performance were through a different set of concepts to the athlete. Now you could say get a coach that's similar to you, but what that does, it allows the coach to be able to take the perspective of his athlete or her athlete so that he can see it through their eyes and then rejudge the information he's going to give them and present it in a way that's going to be most likely to be used. And that's a coach, that could be a sports scientist to an athlete, that could be a personal trainer to a client, to a gym instructor to a gym class, could be a PE teacher to a set of children. Understanding what the views, the personalities, the characteristics of the people you're working with so you can tailor the message is absolutely vital to getting that message across. It's why I should have done a personality test before I started, isn't it? For all of you to understand the best way to get the message across. And it may be something that we could do, that the universities could explore in the future. This sort of thing had value. It doesn't tend to work in big settings, but a personality screening to find out whether the group are introverted, extroverted, so the nature of what you're teaching could then inform what comes next. If you're all very introverted, we wouldn't have tasks like what we've just done. But the thing is, you see, sports groups, and that sport means everything to do with physical activity, coaching, are typically pretty extroverted. And therefore, those sort of tasks tend to work. I've done that one with the thing quite a few times, and it's never failed totally on its head. Okay. Oops. Last slide. It's about 50 slides. There are multiple different approaches to assessing personality. Each one has drawbacks. The trait one, the difficulty in the assessment. State has got some utility, but from the trait, and they're not bad when used together. Behaviourism is observational. Humanism, difficult to draw generalisations. I think the critical eye, and doing a degree and thinking through how can I use this in practice, is looking at the evidence that's been presented to you and say, how did they measure, how did they assess these concepts in order to make these claims? And what we've got done today, in terms of looking at some of those assessments, is to say, well, it's not an exact science. It's not an exact science. So in terms of our story so far, in terms of is there a winning personality, the science isn't at a mature enough stage to be able to go, yeah, it's over here. It's that. We find useful scores which are helpful for practitioners, helpful for athletes. But one uniform set of rules that explains to all things across all situations is unlikely to be found by what we know at the moment. Right, we are coming back. We are coming back. Not here. We are coming back to. We are going to. And I don't know, so you can have to tell me. I think it's been reminded. We are going to. Where's that? Where is it? You see, now you can say anything, and I'll go there. Where are we going? The next. 2 o'clock. Where do we go at 2 o'clock? Over there. I'll go over there. 007. James. Thank you. We're going to 007. WA 007. Where's that, by the way? Over there. Okay. Come back at 2, slightly.